Just as Russia had launched yet another devastating drone and missile bombardment, Ukraine rained down hell mere hours later. One of its largest ever drone strikes was launched on locations in both occupied Crimea and Russia itself, dealing massive damage to multiple targets. This was an act of revenge for all the countless drone and missile bombardments that Ukraine and its people had been forced to suffer for so long. It was revenge for those innocent souls that have lost their lives and seen their homes reduced to rubble. A big dose of its own medicine was given to Russia, and the Kremlin will feel the impact of this attack for quite some time to come. In the early hours of October 6th, the attack occurred, with multiple telegram channels rapidly sharing reports of fires and explosions in several locations. Tracking the situation was the pro-Ukraine outlet, Crimean Wind, with its first post coming at 12:23 a.m. Ukrainian time. A powerful explosion occurred near the Saki airfield in Novofedorovka, subscribers report. Soon, additional posts followed, as more and more reports of explosions ringing out in the area surrounding Saki airfield were received by the channel. This airbase is a major one in the Crimean Peninsula. Once used by Ukraine, the base was taken over by Russian forces during the 2014 annexation of Crimea and has since been used by Russian naval aviation forces, who operate fleets of Sukhoi Su-24 bombers and Sukhoi Su-30 fighter jets, among other aircraft. On several occasions since the war began, Kyiv's forces have targeted the base. For instance, in August 2022, Ukraine managed to wipe multiple Russian aircraft off the map, or in January 2024, when Kyiv launched Storm Shadow missiles at a command post in the area, killing a high-ranking Russian commander. Soon, footage emerged from the scene, with the sound of gunfire ringing out in the background. However, Saki airfield was not the only target of this attack. As the night went on, additional reports of drone sightings and explosions came in from numerous other locations around Crimea, including Feodosia, Yevpatoria, and the village of Andriivka, not far from the Kucha airfield, another important airbase occupied and operated by Russian forces in the Crimean Peninsula. Alarms rang out, and Russian forces scrambled to activate their air defenses in a desperate bid to withstand the onslaught. Clearly, they weren't fast enough. With every passing minute, more reports of explosions in various locations flooded social media, and Crimean Wind continued to keep its countless followers informed and up to date on the events. At 1:50 a.m., the channel revealed that a radar station had been struck at a military post near Yevpatoria on Crimea's western coast. Minutes later, the channel posted again, this time sharing dramatic footage of a raging inferno in the Feodosia area on the southeast coast of the Crimean Peninsula. According to locals, drones struck an oil depot in the area, which was later revealed to be the Sea Oil Terminal, one of the biggest oil transshipment facilities in all of Crimea, with a total oil tank capacity of 250,000 cubic meters, or more than 66 million gallons. Posted to Telegram, numerous videos revealed the dramatic impact of this attack as raging flames filled the air and thick plumes of smoke blanketed the area. And just like Saki airfield, the Sea Oil Terminal is a familiar target for Ukrainian forces. Almost exactly 1 year ago, on October 7, 2024, Kyiv struck this same location, as well as several additional times since the war began. According to the Telegram channel Dipro Ascent, more than a dozen oil tanks located at this depot had already been wiped out by previous attacks. In the city of Feodosia, one of the largest oil depots in Crimea, was attacked. Fuel and lubricants tanks were hit. The oil depot has been attacked many times before, but after the previous strikes, only 22 of the 34 tanks remained intact. That number is now likely to be even lower, as the size of the fires in the videos suggests that at least several oil tanks were successfully hit, sending countless gallons of oil quite literally up in smoke and making Russia's ongoing fuel crisis even worse. So devastating was the attack that the glow from the fire could be seen around 20 miles away. According to Crimean Wind, the channel also reported that trains were being hastily redirected away from the city as Russian officials feared further strikes. Later that night, the authorities also shut down a major highway. With Crimean Wind writing, the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations has closed the Kerch Highway, which runs near the burning oil depot in Feodosia. It's worth noting, too, that this particular depot is of great importance to the Kremlin's war machine. Its strategic location makes it a vital logistical facility in terms of supplying fuel to military forces along the front lines. Now, with fires raging, Russian forces are likely to face even more shortages and delays, weakening their frontline offensives and making it even more challenging to gain ground. And from there, the night only got worse for Russia. As flames licked the skies above Feodosia, additional alarms began to ring out in Sevastopol, the largest city in the Crimean Peninsula and the home base for Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Soon, reports of multiple explosions followed in several different districts, and while no further details have yet emerged, it's likely that drones dealt at least some damage to important Russian assets or infrastructure in this area as well. However, it wasn't only in occupied Crimea that Ukraine's weapons struck their targets. Over the border and into Russia itself, this massive Ukrainian attack also extended, with fires and explosions reported at several additional locations. Locations like Dzerzhinsk, an industrial city situated east of Moscow in the Nizhny Novgorod region. There, the buzzing sound of drones filled the air, followed by explosions and a huge fire at a local manufacturing plant. More specifically, it's believed that the target of this attack was the Sverdlov facility, operated by one of Russia's biggest industrial explosives manufacturers. Local residents reported that a large fire broke out at this location, despite the best efforts of Russian mobile fire units, who can be seen in some of the clips scanning the skies with searchlights to try to identify and take out incoming drones before they can deal any additional damage. Once again, this was not a new target for Ukraine. Kiev's forces have struck this exact location before, most notably in April of last year, with strike drones dealing massive damage to two of the facility's production workshops and an overhead pipeline. In October 2024, another attack followed with several dozen Ukrainian strike drones dispatched to disrupt operations at the plant, which has been included on UN/US sanctions lists since 2023 due to its involvement in producing bombs, anti-tank guided missile warheads, and warheads for air defense systems. The facility is also reported to produce chemicals used in artillery ammunition and other highly destructive explosives, making it a valuable and vital cog in the Russian war machine. It's worth noting also that Dzerzhinsk is over 500 miles away from Ukraine, which shows yet again how effective Kiev's forces have become in regard to carrying out deep strike attacks on locations far beyond its borders. With attacks like this becoming increasingly frequent, the Kremlin is slowly but surely beginning to understand that none of its vast territory is truly safe, and that Kyiv can strike at any time and in any location. Havoc was also wreaked by Ukrainian drones in the Russian city of Klintsy in the Bryansk region, situated north of Ukraine, just beside Belarus. There, residents shared reports of a local thermal power plant on fire. And once more, there was plenty of video footage and photos from those in the area to prove what had happened. The situation was reported by the news outlet Astra on Telegram, writing, "A thermal power plant in Klintsy, Bryansk Oblast, was attacked. Local residents and Ukrainian public groups report publishing footage allegedly from the scene. According to eyewitness reports, a massive explosion rocked the facility just before the blaze began, which may suggest that drones struck a critical weak point or large oil supply. In the wake of the incident, parts of the city also lost power." Speaking of power cuts, another one occurred in the Belgorod region of Russia, affecting tens of thousands of residents. Once more, this was the work of Ukraine's drones. which reportedly targeted the nearby Luch substation, as reported by Crimean Wind and confirmed by the region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov. Suddenly, after the sounds of explosions, power went out in the southern and central parts of Belgorod. Water supply disruptions also began, and for some reason, the Luch substation caught fire. Governor Gladkov confirmed damage to the power grid in Belgorod following the shelling. He scheduled an emergency government meeting. The governor acknowledged that around 40,000 people are without power after the overnight attack, with emergency crews on site to restore the supply. Actually captured by locals, footage shows the moment the power goes out, with dozens of streetlights and lights and windows suddenly going dark, all in the blink of an eye. The extraordinary size and scale of this attack was acknowledged by the Russian Defense Ministry, which claimed to have downed more than 250 Ukrainian drones in total, including 62 above the Black Sea, 40 over Crimea, 34 over Kursk, 30 over Belgorod, 20 in the Nizhny Novgorod area, 17 more in Voronezh, 11 above Krasnodar Krai, and several more in the skies over Bryansk, Tula, Vladimir, and other regions. While official numbers or statistics that come from the Kremlin can't be fully trusted there, it's no doubt at all that this was one of Ukraine's biggest and most impactful drone attacks of the war so far, and piles of evidence back that up. All across Russian and Ukrainian social media channels, images and videos show the full extent of the devastation, with numerous incidents of fires and explosions, with smoke in the air and debris on the ground. Huge effort and time will be demanded to put out the fires, and only then will the real impact of this attack be revealed. But it's likely that Russia will face massive repair jobs at several key facilities, with its fuel and military production capabilities both taking big hits. This big revenge strike from Ukraine came mere hours after Russia had launched yet another devastating drone and missile bombardment at multiple targets, with a large number of drones focused on the city of Lviv, situated in western Ukraine, less than 50 miles from the border with Poland. There, 4 people, all of the same family, were killed, including a 15-year-old girl in the small suburban village of Lepevka. Important military and infrastructure targets had been successfully struck, claimed the Russian Ministry of Defense, but those on the ground tell a very different story. The regional head of Lviv, Maxim Kozitsky, revealed that around 163 drones and missiles entered the area and primarily targeted residential buildings, hospitals, and civilian industry, as well as gas transportation infrastructure. He called the attack especially cynical, given its timing, as temperatures are beginning to drop across Ukraine, and local people will soon be relying on gas to heat their homes and survive the frosty winter conditions. In total, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Russian attack involved more than 500 attack drones and over 50 missiles. It left 5 people dead in total, with others injured, and tens of thousands without power in their homes. Zelensky also called on the international community to continue taking action, providing protection to Ukraine, and calling for stronger air defense agreements to bring Russia's nightly attacks to an end. We need more protection and faster implementation of all defense agreements, especially on air defense, to deprive this aerial terror of any meaning. A unilateral ceasefire in the skies is possible, and it is precisely that which could open the way to real diplomacy. A comparison of these two attacks, which both occurred within the same 24-hour window, reveals the massive difference between Russia and Ukraine when it comes to tactics and strategy. As always, Russia relied on a brute force approach, launching a massive amount of drones and missiles towards disparate targets far and wide across Ukraine. Its weapons dealt some damage to important infrastructure, but largely focused on civilian targets, killing innocent people who posed the country no threat whatsoever. Yet again, Russia proves that its main tactics revolve around striking fear into its opposition and overwhelming them with numerical superiority. However, While the effects of its attack are tragic, as innocent people have yet again been killed, Ukraine has not reportedly suffered any major military losses. It hasn't seen military bases or airfields catch fire, for example, like Russia has. Meanwhile, from a military point of view, Kyiv's attack on Crimea and Russian locations is dramatically more impactful. By targeting places like the Saki airfield, Sea Oil Terminal in Feodosia, and Sverdlov production plant in Dzержinsk, Ukraine's forces are systematically wiping out critical pieces of Russian military infrastructure. Over the course of a single night, they wiped out a massive amount of oil, as well as possibly destroying aircraft at Saki and putting a bomb-making plant out of action, at least temporarily. Knock-on effects and long-term impact will result from all of this. With even smaller stocks of oil, for example, the Kremlin will now have to draw up new plans to deal with its chaotic fuel crisis. Already hundreds of gas stations across Russia have been forced to close. Prices for tanks of gas have skyrocketed. Several kinds of fuel are literally unavailable in multiple locations, and locals are lining up for hours on end just to get diesel or gasoline into their vehicles. Every single time Ukraine's drones or missiles hit another oil-related target, like the facility in Feodosia, that situation gets worse. That's why one of their top priorities for Ukrainian forces has been to identify and take out as many oil depots, pipelines, and fuel storage facilities as they possibly can. This, in turn, has meant that Russia's refining capacity has been slashed by a whopping 38%, and the country is 20% short of the supply it needs to meet national demand. Also hugely impactful are attacks on military production plants, like the one in Dzержinsk. Russian forces rely on these kinds of factories to build the bombs, the missiles, the drones, and the countless other important pieces of military equipment they need to sustain their front-line assaults, aerial bombardments, and other offensive maneuvers into Ukraine. When those facilities get blown up or set on fire, their output inevitably drops. That means fewer bombs rolling off the production lines, fewer drones, missiles, and other weapons for the Kremlin to launch at Ukraine, and that, in turn, means fewer casualties. In short, attacks like this don't merely weaken the Russian war machine, they also save Ukrainian lives. And that's the big difference between the two sides. Russia is all about dealing as much damage as it possibly can to strong-arm Ukraine into submission. It has no qualms about blowing up people's houses and bombing hospitals filled with innocent civilians. Meanwhile, Ukraine acts with both honor and intelligence. It has the means to do exactly what Russia is doing. It could, for example, use its own drone army to hit Russian towns and villages, committing war crimes while killing and injuring civilians without mercy. But it doesn't. It takes the high ground and opts for a significantly more intelligent and strategically sound approach, hitting the Kremlin where it hurts the most and taking out the targets that keep the Russian economy going and the war machine running. The logic behind this is clear for all to see. If Ukraine can deal enough damage to Russia's most important pieces of infrastructure, it will eventually become impossible for the Kremlin to keep the conflict going. The country's economy will be too weak to sustain the war chest. Its domestic troubles, like the fuel crisis and massive labor shortage, will become too big to ignore. Bit by bit, the war is being brought home to Russia, and people across the country are waking up to the reality of this conflict. They re-feeling the effects as they find themselves struggling to afford everyday essentials or finding that their local gas station suddenly has strict limits about how much fuel they are allowed to buy. Those living in areas close to key military locations are also seeing the impact of Ukraine's attacks firsthand, witnessing the sights and sounds of drones flying overhead, explosions sounding out, and raging infernos bursting into life and nearby infrastructure sites. Slowly but surely, more and more of those same Russian people are growing resentful and frustrated that the war is still going on, and even higher up the chain of command, officials, generals, and other high-ranking Russian figures are equally getting tired of a war that appears to have no end in sight and leadership that refuses to make any adjustments to its approach. The pressure is rising on the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and perhaps it will, ultimately, become too much to bear. As he watches his country burn and his economy plummet, even the proud and self-assured Putin may be starting to feel the faintest twinge of regret for his reckless actions. Learn more about Putin's latest problems in our deep dive look at how Russia is set to run out of not just tanks, but artillery manpower and other critical military resources, and may be forced to wave the white flag as early as 2026, or for a more detailed look at the growing levels of dissent among Russian generals and the wider public, watch this video exploring how even hardline Russian nationalists and military bloggers are admitting that Russia has zero chance of winning this war. Make sure to subscribe to our trusted channel too, so you can stay in the know about everything that's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war and other significant conflicts around the world.